The birth of Baba Yaga. The devil determined the essence of evil must walk the earth. So he set out to find his ingredients. In a foreign market, a shriek of rage snared his attention. A woman berated a man twice her size. As she stepped in front of her children, the devil swept up the woman for his bag. Across the globe in a schoolhouse surrounded by fields of swaying wheat, a classroom bully stood up to challenge the teacher. Yet the teacher's eyes narrowed and pierced the self-assured gaze of her pupil, sending him back to his desk. The devil liked what he saw and swept the teacher up. He swept up a woman, the smartest in a room of arguing voices, who didn't speak up to share the answers she knew. A woman who punched hard when a stranger pressed a hand to her skin, and another who screamed when a man told her to smile. A woman clutching wolfbane. A wife steeping oleander leaf. A green-thumbed gardener who nurtured her Bonagainaville full of thorns. Totally killed that. A widow who ran her fingers through her gray-rooted hair until it stood up on end, and another who unabashedly cursed and swore and raised her glass again with no shame. A woman who followed her gut, ignoring the advice given. A grandmother that cackled with joy, she slammed her door on the modern world, preferring her mortar and pestle. A wood fire stove, and the blissful silence that came when technology and its constant interruptions disappeared. The devil dumped his bag of 12 women into a massive cauldron, muddying them in water from an iced-over stream. The fire underneath crackled. The water bubbled, then boiled. A clamminess filled the air of the little hut where he did his work. A hut that began to lurch and pull like it wanted to be free. That is the creation of the Baba Yaga from the 12 women at the hands of the devil. And that was posted in Atlas Obscura by Chris Bezak. And you're listening to Tripping on Legends, episode 140. Baba Ocala Yaga. So, welcome everybody. If you have been following us on social media, you know that this trail of the Baba Yaga has been probably about a month in coming and a month in research and delays and the like. But really, there's been a lot of cross hashtag follow the signness in relation to this episode. It began as just kind of a post, which I'll talk about, and kind of grew into more. And the more and more that I gathered information, did research, did the stories, kind of boiled on the topic itself, the more that I came to realize that this was not just a fairy tale that needed to be told or something that has been kind of slowly creeping into the consciousness of not only communities that are into witchcraft and magic practitioners like mentioned, but also into our common sense, into our common vocabulary. It has touched so much. My students, my 15-year-old students, knew of the Baba Yaga, could speak intelligently about the Baba Yaga. We're shooting back different versions of modern fairy tales or like well-known fairy tales that I hadn't discovered that were it, as well as a lot of people that I knew. I was just kind of throwing it out there. I seem to have a lot of Slavic and Russian and Jewish friends who this was something that they were told as if it were true. And I think that's an important part that we're going to get into tonight. If you didn't find all this stuff, if you didn't get it when I was posting it, probably it's because you're not on our social media, so you should go and do that. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/trippingonlegends. We are at Spooky Tripping on Instagram, and even the little things that I've been dropping on TikTok are at Tripping on Legends. You can, if you like this episode or you're compelled by this, you can kind of see the full range of what we do at Tripping on Legends by going and getting a different podcast. seeing, and I'll actually reference a few, and they'll be in the show notes as we go. A little homework. As a teacher, I like to give my listeners homework. So there is so much to delve into tonight, and I'm not sure, and I guess I would love feedback on maybe some of the conjuring of Baba Yaga, which seems to flow so easily into stories, and she's always just there, and the person either comes upon her or is quested to go find her, that it might be interesting legend trip wise to actually go out to the Ocala, which is really the spirit of this episode, and see if you can find her. So I have to start at the beginning. So my good friend Della, you know her well. If you follow us, she sent me a video from someone named Earth Fairy Holistics, and her idea was that Baba Yaga is the ruler of all liminal spaces. Having done episodes on the back rooms and some other online urban legends or digital legends, obviously the idea of a liminal space was in the consciousness of me, it was in the consciousness of Ella, different people that I work with, but I had never made the connection between the Ocala, and specifically the Ocala shift, and ideas like that, and the idea of a liminal space. The idea that there was something unending about the forest that very much mimicked walking through all of those random rooms and any kind of one of those liminal spaces, and the actual Ocala shift itself being like that, crashing between scenes and things like that. It was really interesting because her description of the Baba Yaga in this video that she made, which I'm going to link into the show notes, is that it's a place where rules stop working. And they stop working specifically at the request and at the power of the Baba Yaga. Time bends, directions reverse, logic falls apart. Now, those are all things that I've used, all phrases that I've used to actually describe what is going on in the Ocala National Forest. So I was intrigued. Disorientation. Paths loop back on themselves. Day and night blur. And the forest feels uncanny. And of course, we mean uncanny in the kind of traditional version of it in terms of real but not real. Like something off about the reality that you are in when you are in this place. She talks about a lot more, right? Which I'm going to get into. I'm going to loop back to at the end. But the idea of it was that this is a liminal space. She has control of it. And that's the part that drew me in, was the idea that, yeah, like sometimes when I get these stories about the Ocala or when I'm out there myself, it does feel like it's going on itself and it's looping back and these kind of ideas that I just had never made the connection before. But the other reason why Della sent it to me was she knew that I was working on my, Swamp Witch book. And the idea of the Baba Yaga was that she was this witch-type figure. Now, in almost all of my research, she's going to be described as a witch of the forest, right? And that kind of liminal space of the forest, which, of course, makes sense. We're talking about the Ocala. But I've already heard it then referenced a few other times as, and this is a really good example of that, was this picture. And I so wish that I could remember what those initials stand for, because this woman, these kind of pictures are all over my house. And I can't remember the woman that I bought them from. I know I bought them in Orlando when we went to go see Optimus Prime. But in there, she's referenced as a swamp witch. And the more that I then kind of began to delve into the Baba Yaga, the more I was like, wait a minute, this makes so much sense when you're talking about the different stories that I've collected, the different stories I've been told, descriptions, connections that I've made. And I had only vaguely known what the Baba Yaga was. And I knew what it was, oddly enough, because Ella calls her friend the Baba Yaga. And I had that picture that I just showed you up for a little bit in my room when we were working on legends and folklore. And people had like made references to it, and it was there. Like I didn't know what the Baba Yaga was. I didn't even really notice her feet, which in the picture that I just showed are bird feet. And then I started to get into it, and I started to read a ton of these stories that were kind of coming out, and I was able to collect, and they do seem to be all over the place. So a definition for those people who don't know, I'm just, you're knee deep in it. You start to think that everyone must know about this because, I've been putting it out there and it's just so much in the consciousness of people. So the Baba Yaga is these are the descriptions that are given to her across multiple platforms: trickster, mentor, goddess, witch. One of the important ideas is this idea of that she is a feminist icon. That came up time and time again in my research, which is interesting, and we're going to delve into a little bit. She preys on children. So there are not too many Baba Yaga stories where she is like going after adults. She, for the most part, lives in a hut or a shack or something like that in the woods. And that shack, which is almost kind of like one of the defining characteristics of the Baba Yaga, is on chicken feet. And in the Slavic region and the Jewish region, the shack is always described as having chicken feet. Physically, she's old with skinny legs. Now, the skinny legs in her part sometimes are actually chicken legs themselves, or bird legs, I should say. She's repulsive with a large nose, with a big nose. And we're going to kind of hit upon different things. We're going to come back to the big nose part because that becomes an important part of it. The shack that she lives in is actually, it rejects people coming in. So people are not supposed to be in there. She doesn't want people in there. So it's this weird pull between wanting children in and what she's going to do to these children, and then I don't want people in. So it's kind of like you almost have to trick the house, the cottage, the shack to allow you in, which is a very interesting factor. She has a broom, right? So there we go with the witch connection. She has this broom. However, her broom is not used in a traditional witch sense, but rather the whole trickster kind of part of her personality is she uses it to sweep away her tracks, right? So she can get away from things, or she can kind of have plausible deniability in the communities that she has done something, especially because in almost none of the stories that I read does she go out looking for children, right? This is not this is not like she's in the woods stalking kids. The kids fall upon her. However, the kids often escape, and when they escape, she needs to hop into her iron mortar, which is her throne. Sometimes people say that's where she crushes the bones or casts her spells, and she chases after the kids. So this whole idea that she then needs to maybe sometimes in some of the stories sneak back into the kids' rooms and get them there. She needs the broom so that she can kind of cover what she's doing and never gets caught. In many of the stories, she is considered a cannibal, right? There are some instances, and from my experiences, it's probably the cannibalism is implied, but not necessarily right there at the front of it. She seems more to enslave or want to enslave. So there is an implied she then eats them later on kind of aspect to the story. But in most of them, it's not. In most of them, I say, she's not necessarily eating the children, or she's like, and I'm going to be happy to eat you afterwards. Like I said, in the majority of these stories that I've come across, there is not there's not a direct connection to a swamp, but there is a undertone of it. And I think that maybe I'm making too much of a difference between what a forest and a swamp is. Having come from the forest and moved to the swamp, I kind of have the perspective of like, oh, what the differences are. But these are stories that originally came from Russia, the Ukraine, Poland, Slovakia, Belarus, but also came down through the stories of Jewish people. Now, oftentimes the Jewish people in those areas are the ones spreading the story, but it's definitely like not necessarily just like a Jewish story, although it's often featured in a lot of Jewish folklore. And so this is kind of like a little bit of where she's been seen. So if you've heard the term Baba Yaga, you may know her, much like Troy McClure. You may know me from. So she's been in Hellboy, she's been in Puss in Boots, and she's been in John Wick. So most of my students knew it from John Wick. And I had to, I'm not a fan of the John Wick movies. I'm not a fan of John Wick in general. And so I had to do a little bit of research. It's like, oh, that's because he's Russian. Now, it's interesting because he's obviously male. His character is not particularly portrayed in the movies. My understanding is as being female or as, having female traits. But he's called the Baba Yaga. The Baba Yaga has made its way into video games. It's made its way into its own digital legend, kind of like popping in to a lot of other different legends. It's been used it was used extensively in Soviet era cartoons, and I think that's an important kind of aspect of it, is because it has been traditionally used as this. Are you going to do the right thing, right? Now, I think we can read a lot of the fairy tales and the stories that I'm going to tell that involve kids and stepmothers. She's often takes that role, or witches in the woods. And we don't see the kids as wrong or the kids as bad, right? They're more sinned against than sinning. They've got this kind of they're walking in the woods. They get, they're trying to avoid something and bad stuff fall upon them. And that role does exist. That kind of just, you stay out of the woods. That's the message. That's the theme. Don't go into the woods. Happens with these stories. But there's also this kind of idea that the Baba Yaga is placed there. And this will flip back to the Ocala later. For people who break rules, who don't listen, who have bad manners, who are doing things that are wrong, and the Baba Yaga is there to kind of straighten them out. They fall into this weird kind of folklore, which I think is kind of limiting, but it's called cottagecore. And it's, there's a cultural need. It's in Sonic and Mario. I just read, that was a random note to that. It seems to be you have to work hard kind of idea, right? So even if you're doing the right thing, are you working hard? One of the things that Baba Yaga is famous for saying is, have you come to do deeds or run from them? So in a lot of these stories where she's going to take the role of Punisher and of stopgap in the woods, she's got that kind of idea of service and servitude to her, which is kind of weird, right? In the stories that we know, these witches in the woods of the stepmothers, Cinderella, right? Most famously, there's some, chores and things you have to do, but the idea of punishment and the idea of, and here's where the mentor part comes in, the idea of you've got to do this, you've got to do good deeds, but you also have to do hard work and things like that, is kind of this weird part of it, because ultimately she wants to eat them, right? That cabin that I was talking about, oftentimes it is protected by mythical animals. Fences made of bones, hence the cannibalism part. And so I started really getting into like, what exactly is this thing, right? And I found that it crossed over so many things. I'm going to like talk a little bit more. This is kind of an alternate or an addition to kind of some of her traits. Her legs are almost always bony, but also they are sometimes described as bird. And I keep saying bird. Obviously, all the legends, or most of the legends, say chicken. But we're going to talk tonight about the similarities and the differences between different types of birds. Because as I was going through this, a few different birds that are not chickens came into my purview with this, and it was those ones that kind of pushed me forward. And if you know the show, you already know the birds that I'm talking about that are specifically related to the Ocala and things within the Ocala. She often has disproportionately large breasts. I'll just leave that where it is. Now, remember I talked earlier about the nose. Now, it's interesting because in many people have analyzed what the Baba Yaga is and her impact and things like that, have talked about the idea of there being anti-Semitism bred into the stories of the Baba Yaga and how they've been passed down. So even though they are often told as a Jewish tale, and a lot of the stories that I got from people were people who were Jewish, the people who were spreading him, and remember I talked about the Soviet campaigns, it's pushed forth as in like and again, it's the outsider aspect that we've talked about so much on the show. And so much, in the legend trips we do, the fear of the outsider and the pushing out of the outsider, that it seems to have a very specific thing. Now, she sometimes has a flock of black geese. Now, this is an interesting aspect because we're going to talk geese as we were kind of looking through different ones, and I'm sharing things out. Other people were sharing out, and I had several people, Nikki, who used to be a co-host, Della also pointed out, some other people, that there were, they've seen several pictures where she is with ravens or crows. Probably the most like jaw-dropping aspect of this when I was doing my research is that as I'm reading these descriptions, the very first thing that I thought about was Over the Garden Wall. If you have not seen Over the Garden Wall, you need to buy it on Prime. You need to find out where it is. You need to watch it on YouTube. Whatever you want to do, like however you get your media, Over the Garden Wall is genius. And it's so amazing and right on and just the right part of wacky. And it's like there's a there's just we watch it every September. I'm sorry, every October now. And as I'm watching, I'm like, oh crap! Like that's the sisters, right? And this connects into so much of the other lore because she's often portrayed as the aunt of somebody. You need to go see Auntie. And so if you've never seen Over the Garden Wall, Elijah Wood, amazing. And we have the characters are in the woods. They're trying to get out of the woods, and they need to go find the good woman of the woods, who's called Adelaide of the Pasture, right? And she's looking for servants. She has these scissors in the thread. It's implied that she kind of has cut off the wings of different people, or she's transformed someone into a bird, and they can cut off their wings and they can become, become better. And then and she's portrayed as the good one. And then there's Auntie Whispers, played by, oh my word, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. Played by Pennywise, our own Ocala National Forest legend, Tim Curry. And she has a sense of smell. She's a cannibal. She has a huge head. And she has a little girl or a teenager named Lauren trapped there, and she has to keep sweeping. And she has to keep sweeping the bones. And so that's the implication of the the cannibalism, and if she doesn't keep working, if Lauren doesn't keep working, she'll turn into this evil monster, which the kids don't know, right? The kids on the show don't know. They help her out, and she ends up being like, rah, this monster. And then at some point, both of these women, both Adelaide and Auntie Whispers, who are flipped, right? You think the good one's good, she's bad. You think the bad one's bad, she's good. Are the final like death's escort, and they are working with, to some degree, this dark force, this dark man, if you will, Ocala, who is kind of, out there and patrolling the woods and looking for souls. So again, it made me think of everything that's going on in the Ocala. Now, we're going to talk about all of these different connections to like folklore and like fairy tales that I read probably at least 24 stories about the kind of like all the different like fairy tales, and it's one of those things where you're reading it and you go, wait a minute, I think I've heard that before, right? One of them was called Baba Yaga and the Little Girl with the Kind Heart. So this seemed to be the most prolific story, and it's about a man, I should say, who has a daughter, and he puts the girl in. He gets remarried. The mom dies. She gets a stepmother. She's got these bad sisters. And she puts our female hero, in a shed. You'll notice that almost all the time the women are the main characters, or little girls are the main characters. She's then told, so she's there. She has only a little bit of food. She has this little bit of food. She decides she's going to give the little bit of food to a mouse who is kind of with her in this shed. And the mouse ends up becoming her friend and helping her through everything. So we got a very that's a theme that's popped up a ton in other folklore. And she's told that she has to go visit her stepmother's sister. So technically her step aunt, who is the Baba Yaga. And it comes flat out and says it's the Baba Yaga. She has to go get a needle and a thread from the sister. So she's in the woods. She's getting lost, all these kind of classic themes. And as she's told to follow her nose, and as she's kind of going through all of this stuff, she keeps picking up these random items. And as she's picking up these random items, for example, she picked up a handkerchief and like a thing of food and like a ribbon, like all these things which at the time seemed totally random. She gets there and she is trapped by the Baba Yaga, and she is forced to weave. So the Baba Yaga's like, I'm going to go. I have to find what you're looking for. You have to weave. Of course, she has no intention of letting her free. She's just, occupying her. And so she eventually uses all those items to escape, and then she ties the ribbon on the trees, and the trees are who are supposed to be attacking her are keeping her there, oh my word, look at this beautiful ribbon. And she's able to escape. She uses the towel, which she got at some point. She crosses the river, the witch is coming after her, the Baba Yaga's coming after her, in the mortar, flying after her, and she finally is able to escape. So I really like that story. There was a lot in there that ended up kind of popping up in other places. There is another one, which I'm going to talk about, called Vasiliasa the Beautiful. And this one came from Anna Mornagova. And it's a variant of the step tale. It's another variant of that stepmother one. The stepmother sends her out to get light from the Baba Yaga. So it's not her sister in this one. She's just sent out to the woods, go find the shack, with a red and white, and she sees these red and white horsemen, and then a black one that are supposed to represent dawn and noon and night. She gets to the shack, and it is a fence of human bones and the skulls of dead men. Which is crazy because what's up with all the dead men when it's supposed to be all these children? So she works for 2 days, and she gets the skull. She puts it on a stick, and that's kind of how she's able to trick the Baba Yaga to get out. She eventually brings the light back because it was supposed to be a fool's mission. She wasn't supposed to get it. And the light instantly kills her stepmom and her sister. And she escapes. And eventually she ends up marrying the Tsar. So I guess the point of the story is if you put skulls on sticks, you'll be able to kill your enemy and then marry the king. So there you go. I'm sure somewhere in a little girl world that is your goal in life. But then there was this other one, and I really thought this one was interesting because it touched into so much of what was the essence of why I'd started, and that is Matryoshka by Becky Hickox Ayers. And that is the story of Kata, who's the granddaughter. And she helps this woman in the village, and she gets a doll named Matryoshka. And it took me a really long time in the story, like overthinking, to realize that it was one of those Russian dolls, like where you crack it open, and there's a smaller doll inside, and then there's another one, there's a smaller one inside, and there's another one, it's a smaller one inside. In my defense, I think this was early on, and I was totally like thinking of it as Jewish folklore rather than Russian folklore. So in this one, the Baba Yaga is a witch. She ends up kidnapping Kata and holding her in the house. And again, Kata is forced to do all these chores and do all these things with the intent that if she stops doing them, if she wears down and she can't complete the task by the end of the day, by the end of the night, actually, that she is going to have to be eaten. And so she's absolutely devastated by this. And so she has a little doll in her hand, and it says, Matryoshka, Matryoshka, I'm oh so small, but not the smallest of them all. And then it will, whoop, like the doll detaches, the doll pops out, it does whatever the thing is, that whatever the errand is, whatever the cleaning requirement is, and then now there's two of them kind of hanging around. And that happens like for 3 nights, right? Like she keeps saying, very much like Princess Bride, I'd just like to kill you in the morning if you don't finish this stuff. She finishes each task, but it's not her doing it. It's these dolls kind of popping it up. Then finally, it's kind of like the final like showdown. The Baba Yaga goes out to collect mushrooms. And her intent is she is going to use this spell to tenderize her victim. And so even if she does the thing, she's not going to make it through the night. And all of a sudden, so she's trying, she gets the mushrooms, she's using them to cast the spell, but the Matryoshka doll keeps whispering into the witch's ear. And each time she whispers into the ear, while she's trying to cast this spell, the spells keep getting messed up. And each time the spells get messed up, the little girl Kata is able to escape a little bit more until finally the last one backfires. She turns into a frog, and Kata is able to find her way out. So these are the kind of stories that it was time and time and time again. And, I could go on with the different versions and the different ones of it. The books that I'm referencing are in the new Tripping on Legends bookstore that I have that's posted as part of the links. But I really wanted to talk about like the overallness of this, the overall kind of ideas of these, and A, their place in folklore, and then B, their place in the Ocala, and a lot of the stories that I gathered from the Ocala. So in a lot of these stories, and people are already kind of responding about the legs, sometimes the legs are human, sometimes the legs are bird-like legs. Sometimes, like Joy pointed out, the legs, it's one leg is normal and the other leg is bony, right? Or bird-like. So oftentimes she is portrayed like, especially like in the Russian kind of ideas, the Russian ones, she is portrayed as a bird goddess, like a Siberian bird goddess, which is maybe where we get the idea of the Stark. And she's this midwife who comes. That's the helper part. But it made me think about two things very in particular. One was the idea of the devil in the dance hall. So if you know that legend, it usually is a woman of ill repute, a hooker, something like that, and they're dancing with this absolutely dashing person. And this idea of the devil in the dance hall is shown in little bits and pieces in all these other folklores having to do with the devil or some kind of evil force, demonic force, things like that. They're dancing, and this man is dashing. He's handsome, and he's seducing the woman. I'm not sure exactly what you need to seduce a hooker, but there you go. Private dancer for money. Sorry, broke into that. I hope that doesn't like kick me off my social media. It'll kick me out of your hearts, though, I'm sure. And then at some point during the exchange, the man's pant leg comes up or something happens, and it's revealed that one or both of his legs are goat, right? Or are deformed somehow. And that's how the hero of the story, the person who, like, we're watching it through their eyes, is able to determine that this is not a person, this is someone, this is a demon, this is whatever, and they're able to kind of like bolt out of the situation and save themselves. Now that bird aspect, for me, made me, and all through this, and a lot of the pictures like I posted and that I found, made me think of my most famous, my most beloved witch of them all, which is see what I did there, which is the Stikini. To me, it's like a direct correlation. There's so much in the Stikini lore that kind of doubles back, right? So if you're unfamiliar, if this is the first time you've ever heard that term, and you're not a regular, listener to the show or viewer, Stikini are in Florida and in Oklahoma are seminal vampire witch owls. And they have been responsible, it is said, for abductions of people all throughout the Ocala. Specifically, not girls, not young girls, but rather men who are doing things that they're not supposed to. So I guess we could say those are the opposite ends of spectrums. Like on one end, you have little girls who need to learn their lessons, and the other one, I'm waiting for Ella to come in and start singing, from the Office. And the other one is these men who have been corrupted to the point that they're being punished. The Stikini get their power from a goddess, and this goddess has given them the power to get vengeance upon men who have done them wrong. And as they do this, it's very Wendigo-ish, or Wendigo, however you prefer to say it. As they cast these spells, it's actually, they lose a little bit more of their humanity until they become these monstrous owls that walk on two legs. They look like they're human by day, and people who see them by day often report, as they're being seduced, as they're being drawn in, the thing that awares them to the fact that it's not what you think it is are these legs. They see one leg that looks like it's an owl leg. They are known to punish people. They are known to be able to shapeshift. They are known to travel together, which I haven't found any references to a tribe of Baba Yagas. It seems to be like, it's a Baba Yaga. There's not like, there are Baba Yagas. Baba Yagai? I don't even know what the plural of Baba Yaga would be, but that doesn't seem to be something that's part of the lore to them. They have the legs. They have some kind of communion with birds. Stikini are not necessarily known for living in cabins. They seem to be wanderers more, or they seem to be able to transport to different places more than that. Now, this is not just a legend, right? I've got story after story of people who are in the Ocala National Forest who come upon these, their car breaks down, and they are assaulted by these things that they can't hear, but they see, but they hear the screeching. And then their car gets hit by things, or their boat gets hit by things. And when they get afterwards, it's like something like a big owl has screeched down. I spent time analyzing the difference between chicken legs and owl's legs and claws and all that kind of stuff, and I don't see that much of a difference. So it's one of those things, which I guess you have to do with a lot of this stuff, is you have to say how much of this is folklore and how much of this is cryptid, right? And of course, anyone who knows anything is going to spout out the idea of like, well, all legends are based on something. Yes, right? But there's a huge difference between people continuing to see this thing in the Ocala National Forest and in other places, and it being, like something that is thousands of years old in a completely different part of the world. Are these beasts, are these witches? Because the important part, they're both witches. Are these witches somehow universally punished, right? Or punished in a very similar way that makes their alternate form have some kind of bird-like quality to it? And what's the connection between birds and witches anyway, right? Like, I understand the whole familiar aspect, but if we're talking about cliche, it always seems that a witch's familiar is a cat or a snake or a salamander, right? Like, obviously, we don't want to limit it, right? Anything can be a familiar to a witch. But traditionally, birds have not necessarily been that. Birds have, in witch stories, folklore witch stories, have been messengers of witches, right? Like, they've sent them out to do their bidding and things like that, which is different than a familiar. In this case, it seems like there's a deep connection between the bird world and the Baba Yaga, and the idea that, like, there's almost a mix of the two. And of course, the best example of that are the Stikini. They are defined by their owlness. Beautiful women in the woods, right? Don't go after them, though, because as soon as you go after them, they're going to hunt you down, right? They're going to kill you. They're going to suck your blood. They're going to eat you. So that, again, loops back into what the ultimate end goal of the Baba Yaga seems to be as well. I want to go back to a few of the other ideas that were expressed in that original video. So in the video that kind of sparked the entire thing, there seems to be a mindset of people who are in that area. It started from you in Astor, right? You were in Astor time. Now, I was used to Astor time. Astor, Florida, for those who don't know what I'm talking about. I was used to that because I do live, on the Gulf Coast. So I'm used to island time. I'm used to places like Key West or even like back in the day, places like, Provincetown, having this, like, if you're on the water, if you're in this kind of vacation spot, there is this idea that time doesn't exist, and you are just kind of going with the flow. And that's something that's very popular in places where there's oceans. Not really other places, although maybe it's just because I haven't been to many, like, really, really, really small town places. A place like Astor, who the very first time I got there, I was like, hey, when am I going on? When am I doing my presentation? They're like, don't worry about it. Wait a few minutes. We run on Astor time, which meant time is something fluid. It's not, you're supposed to speak at 1, you're going to speak at 1. Everyone's going to get here at 1. And so it was this... It was kind of frustrating if you're the kind of person who likes to arrive on time and things like that. But the idea was this kind of almost acceptance that there is a place, and you are in that place, where reality is different. And that's what drew me to the Ocala. This woman, this Earth Fairy Holistics, the woman who originally posted the video, she talks about assaults from the Baba Yaga. And I found the same exact thing when I interviewed people who had what I deemed to be Stikini encounters. Your interaction with her is an initiation. You can't defeat the Baba Yaga. Even though in the stories, oftentimes the little girl gets away. She waits to see how you're going to react, right? You have to not try to fix it, but you have to understand that you are caught up in a different world. That this space that you're in is, you have no control over it. You can't manipulate it the way that you manipulate your normal world, right? The way you manipulate the world that you live in on a daily basis. You can't do that in the Baba Yaga land. And so you endure it. And the best way to endure it is to surrender to it. So once you surrender yourself, you are now at the point where you don't defeat the Baba Yaga. She just loses interest in you. This is the same kind of thing that almost all of the attacks by Stikini that I was able to document and that people I interviewed about and other ones I've now heard. It's always about closing your doors, resisting the temptation to go outside, and enduring the few hours that this screeching thing is kind of trapping you inside of your vehicle or inside of your modern part of your world. And that if you do that, everything will be okay, right? And so a few of the encounters that I heard of on other sites and other people, the person is not able to kind of contain themselves within the car or the boat, and they try to escape, and then they're never seen again. We have all the explanations of what the Ocala is inside of that, right? We have the idea of the liminal space and like why so many people disappear in the Ocala and are never seen again, or they disappear and then mysteriously pop up a crazy amount of time later in a different part. We have the idea of this kind of endurance and having to survive something and not knowing where you actually were when it was going on. When I ask people, it happened to me today. I was talking to someone about the Ocala, and I'm like, what town? They were like, I have no idea what town I was in. So many people report that, even people who spend a lot of time in the woods. And then we have this other element, which is the surrender part. Because anyone who I've interviewed or talked to began with Aster and lasted pretty much from every person who would consider themselves part of the woods, is this absolute kind of welcome to the Ocala. Like when they hear these stories, they don't get flipped out. They don't think it's freaky. They think it's part of the setting of where they are and who they are because they live there. And so I would hear all of these things like, well, that's the Ocala for you, or, yep, welcome to the Ocala. That kind of surrender to like this what should be an absolutely crazy in any kind of aspect of the world ideas. Seeing things, experiencing things, people disappearing, you disappearing, right? Things that were there on Tuesday not being there on Wednesday. These things that should totally flip them out. The people who have lived there long enough have this kind of, that's the way that it is, and they have a complete acceptance of it. And that's the interesting part of the Baba Yaga as well, is that in all of these stories, she is seen as this kind of figure. And like I said, she's never defeated. People escape. But she is, to a large degree, the safeguard of the woods, right? Like she seems to create some kind of balance there. She seems to be needed there. Now, whether that need is training young kids, especially young girls, about what they're supposed to be doing, if it is to keep it clean of men who are not supposed to be doing what they're doing in the woods, whether it's supposed to be just maintaining this status as a patron for witches, the Baba Yaga's there doing it. And so it's really interesting to see kind of how that weaves through all of these stories, because she should be this absolutely horrible character, and yet she often comes off as this. And I did read this book, The Baba Yaga's Assistant, which was pretty amazing, by Marika Makula. And it had that same kind of idea where, like, the girl actually becomes, the apprentice of the Baba Yaga and learning all the secrets and helping her do this and that and this and that. And it should be noted, Baba Yaga in here does have bird feet. What I'm left with is a new perspective on the forest, and definitely a new perspective on what's going on in the green swamp as well, and specifically my Pemberton Ferry Swamp Witch Hog Island thing going on, because so many of these stories that are connected to it have Baba Yagness to them. The more that I got past, I'm not going to say the cliche, but kind of like the canon stories, and started getting more into other stories, I started to see how much the term forest was being replaced with swamp. And it wasn't necessarily a regional thing. I don't know what the climate is like in Belarus, like what the geography is of that. Are there swamps in the Ukraine? These are things I don't know. But the idea of swamp kept coming up again and again and again as I was getting into the later parts of my research. So my question becomes, and this is, I would love to have your feedback on this, going back out to the Ocala, exploring the Ocala from a witch perspective. Now, we've done this in several different places. We've done it with respect. We've done it with folklore type witches. We've done it with modern witches. Neo-paganism, like bringing it there. I wonder if there's a way to conjure the Baba Yaga. Is there a way to conjure the owl swamp witches that have been infesting my life over the past 3 months? Is there a way to go to the Ocala as a legend trip? To trip the Baba Yaga. That's the thing that's still rolling around in my head. Because A, I'm not a man who does bad things. I'm a great guy. B, probably more to the point, I'm also not a young girl who needs to learn her rules. I don't know if that involves like cheating on a girlfriend and then going into the woods and hoping that, either the coyote woman or the Baba Yaga like takes me over. I'm not quite sure. I would love suggestions on how to do that. And I'm going to keep rolling around my head because I have a few Ocala things I need to follow up on that. And I definitely plan, especially in the summer, of going to the swamp as I finish that book. And so I'm thinking, what is a way that I can kind of bring a legend trip aspect to this? So I would love your feedback on that. And, of course, you can give me that feedback by connecting with us on any of the multiple ways that you can. You can go to www.trippingonlegends.com. You can write me an email at spookytripping@gmail.com or join our Facebook things at facebook.com/trippingonlegends, which will then lead you to an entire maze of different pages having to do with episodes and the like that we've been following. You can, of course, go and hang out with us on Instagram at Spooky Tripping, and, of course, Tripping on Legends on TikTok. Get the show. I mean, if anything, if you're listening to this show, click on the links that we have and get episodes about the Stakini and about some other things having to do with liminal spaces, and just kind of create your own playlist, right? We've got some more interesting shows going down the road, some that are connected to Florida Legends and some that are dipping our feet, I should say, into other states that are nearby for potential summer legend trips. So you're going to want to stay in touch with us. I am here by myself in green on St. Patrick's Day, but still by myself. But for all those that work with Tripping on Legends, here's hoping that all of your trips are legendary.